When I was in my 20s, I moved to Southern California, just me and my cat, climbed into our car, packed what I could, and headed south to discover myself. So I was living alone. I didn't know anybody, and I started making friends, and I made friends with this gentleman, and he invited me to go camping and hiking. I had never been hiking. I had never done much camping. And so I got a backpack, I packed it full. Now this was totally just as a friend. There were about 20 other people traveling, and we were going to the high Sierras. Oh, this is not just like, let's go up in a parking spot and camp, right? We started out hiking. Everybody surpassed me, of course, and I had a backpack that I had thought I packed as light as possible. And I'm like the slowest. And of course, my friend is feeling like he's got to hang out with me, which, well, he should, right? But he was interested in this girl that was on the trip, too. So he said to me, why don't you go on up ahead? We just want to sit and have a chat for a little bit. And why don't you go on ahead and just stay high and to the right? And I said, okay, I'm naive. He knows, blah, blah, blah. So I'm hiking along, and I come to a path, and a fork in the path, and I think, okay, stay high and to the right. And I keep hiking, and I'm not seeing anybody, and all of a sudden, I come up to a very high peak, and it's the end of the trail. And there is nobody around, and there are mountains all around me, high peaks, snow-covered mountains. And between me and those mountains is valley and rocks and other things. And I freaked out. I was afraid for my life, right? The first thing I did was took off that darn heavy backpack, threw it on the ground, and fell myself on it and cried. And then I screamed for help, and I shouted and asked for help, and all I heard was my voice coming back, going, help, 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 echoing off the mountains. I was frightened, and I didn't know what to do. Now, that was about 30 years ago when I first started in this work, and I had just been learning about meditation. And I thought that when you meditated, you had to lay down. That tells you how much I was learning about meditating, right? And right in front of me was this platform of rocks, like really jagged rocks. It was like a bed of nails. But I was so frightened. I was so terrified. I go, I have to meditate and I have to lay down. That's all I know to do. And so I don't even to this day remember the pain, but I know it was painful laying on that rock. I had to calm myself down, and I had to do ohms. Wasn't quite sure what else I was supposed to do. And I was laying there, and all of a sudden I had an amazing experience. And one of the things I had heard was, don't drink the water, there's Giardia in the water, right? And everything around me seemed dangerous. And all of a sudden, laying there on my back, I felt the stream start funneling into my chest. And then those rocks down in the crevices start from, and the mountains, the peaks, and the sky, and the clouds came rushing in me. And I will tell you, at first I was afraid. And I thought, maybe it's because I'm up here in the altitude and I'm afraid, and maybe this is a part of a delusion or something. And I laid there, and then I said, what else can I do? I'm feeling something, I don't know what it is. And I had, as I started in this work, and I was in art school at the time, I started in my studio, I had been drawing images of goddesses. And so I thought, well, I'll just pull up one of those goddesses and I'll imagine the goddess, and that'll bring me comfort at least. And so I'm laying on my back, and I'm like full of all of nature. And this image of this goddess became very clear to me. And I said, what is this about? And she said, you are all things, and there's nothing to fear. Well, that's good. But I'm laying here on a bed of nails, And I still don't know what to do. So I said, what do I do? And she said, go to what you know. And so I thought about the meditation. I don't know too much about that. I'm starting to learn that my thinking is, creating my experience. I'm like, how did I create this? I will tell you, sidebar here. A year later, I was telling somebody this story, and I said, yeah, they told me to stay high and to the right. Who sees it? High and to the right. And it took me a year to figure out how I got lost up there. So I'm thinking through all that, and then all of a sudden I go, oh, well, if I turn around and I go back to the campground where we took off, I know where I'm at, and there's a park ranger there and everything. And all of a sudden, I wasn't lost anymore. And I stood up and I put that darn backpack on my back. I went hiking off to the campground. And when I got there, of course, there was nobody I knew. And actually, the ranger station was closed up. But there was a circle of guys sitting there. And I'm like this single girl walking into this circle of guys. And I'm thinking, that's kind of scary, isn't it? Turns out, there's a lot more to this story, and I don't need to tell you. I was rescued after a few hours because my friend had sat there for hours talking to this girl, and it wasn't until he arrived at the camp that people realized I was missing. But finally, from all kinds of different directions, my saviors came, my heroes came over the mountain, picked up my backpack. Nobody let me go behind anymore or in front. They all stayed with me. And there's a lot more to this story. But that was my first experience of realizing that the power of image can help us bring what's inside of us, what we know, and the connection with whatever you may call it, with the divine, with the universal principles, whatever it is, and actually help guide you. And so, goddesses became my thing to draw. Anyway, that was my first experience with creating a muse.